I have a stitch that never stops hugging you, so I'm basically never going to be alone or unhappy again. Hello to the internet, my name's Craig Montgomery and we're here today to talk about the things that make you say, who even am I? And today we're gonna talk about confidence. I like to think of the concept as presence, mostly because confidence typically comes with an aggressive connotation, and I think that presence is a more open term that gives freedom of self-expression, but if confidence works for you, then you do you, boo. I had a friend suggest that I do a video on self-validation, and I think that that stems from this concept, so here we are. This is actually an issue that I struggled with very deeply through my adolescence and into my young adulthood, so I feel these feels a lot. So let's talk about what it might look like to not really be able to validate your own existence. I believe that that is rooted in a low sense of self-esteem, which can look like having a negative self-image, feeling unworthy of people's time and attention, lots of apologizing for just being in the room, obsessing over how other people perceive you, constantly attempting to find validation from those people, apologizing for asking for validation, tiny but extreme bursts of overcompensation of feeling yourself moments, and a downward spiraling after effect from said feeling yourself moment where you are definitely not feeling yourself. Raise your hand if it me. And I'll say the rest of this with the usual disclaimer that these are my own thoughts and feelings and opinions about how to move through this and build a better inner space. So if these thoughts don't work for you, then by all means ignore me. I'm really just trying to share my journey in the hopes that it sheds some light for you in how to move through your own thoughts and feelings. My journey 100% is not the journey for everybody, and it's just not going to work across the board. So this very well may not work for you. In my experience, these emotional patterns are accompanied by a negative and very critical inner voice. So my first big breakthrough was adjusting the way that I spoke to myself inside my head, which is not an easy feat. I read a ton of self-help books, I practiced mindfulness, and I did a lot of meditation, and I journaled quite a bit, really digging into getting to know myself better and trying to break down the things that I was saying and find out why. There's a lot of inward introspective looking to figure out what was going on. It did take quite a bit of time, but thankfully there were marks of progress along the way that helped keep me motivated. And I would say that the big turning point for me was when I conceptualized being my own friend. That process is kind of complex, and I don't want this video to be like 20 minutes long, so if you guys are interested in that, then I can maybe do a separate video on it. But for the time being, just general be your own friend is good. The main point being here that I would never speak to a friend the way that I was speaking to myself in my own head. So when I did make that sort of conceptual shift in my brain of being a friend to myself, it really helped adjust the language that I was using to formulate my thoughts. The second thing that I addressed was apologizing for myself. I believe I was put onto this idea by a cartoon originally, maybe it was an article, it was quite a few years ago, but I do know of a comic that highlights what I'm talking about pretty well, so I'll link to that below. The point is to transform your I'm sorries into thank yous. Social situation. So let's say that you're in a social situation and you're feeling down and like you're not much fun. Instead of saying, I'm sorry, I'm such a bummer, you can say, thank you so much for your company. I'm going through a really hard time and I really appreciate being able to spend some time with you. There's a couple things to address here on why that is an effective step to take, and the first would be the shame around having uncomfortable feelings. Our culture basically tells us that being happy is the only option. It also labels sadness and other uncomfortable emotions as negative and therefore bad. So it can be very scary to be vulnerable enough to admit to having uncomfortable feelings. But sadness, pain, and the hundreds of other emotions that are more uncomfortable to sit with are not only inevitable, they're also necessary for us to experience the brighter side of life. So by taking responsibility for our own emotional experience, we can move through the shame of having those uncomfortable feelings and express to our friend our appreciation of their efforts, which will likely strengthen the bond that you have with them Whereas if you're apologizing and pointing like more pressure onto the fact that you're kind of being a downer in the situation, that actually could tax the friendship that you have with that person. So we're being our own friend with a kinder inner voice, we're turning I'm sorry's into thank yous, and the third step is probably the hardest, and that is going to be giving other people the freedom to think about you whatever they want. If your experience is anything like mine, when you fall into this pit of low self-esteem, you can become obsessed with how other people are perceiving you. I would say that the first hurdle here is to admit to yourself that it's none of your business what anyone else thinks of you. It can be a very seductive thought to think of your image as something that you own, and therefore you want to control the way that other people view it and how they feel about it. And I honestly can't express how much you do not have control over this. And the more energy that you allow to flow into the path of trying to, the more manipulative you're going to get of other people. And that's only going to work against you, because no one likes being manipulated. So how do we give people the freedom to think of us what they will? That's a little bit of a does the chicken or the egg come first situation. As you become more comfortable with yourself, it becomes much less important for other people to be comfortable with you, which coincidentally kind of makes other people more comfortable with you, by the way. So I'd really say that it boils down taking your focus away from the external world and turning inward. When you're being your own friend with a constructive, healthy inner voice and creating a life that you enjoy living, it becomes pretty easy to accept that someone else doesn't like you. And being able to accept that someone else doesn't like you is the greatest freedom you could possibly give yourself. Now, that's not an excuse to be rude to other people or treat them however you want. It's actually an invitation to wish them well on their journey and understand that your paths are just different. I think that building this space for yourself is where confidence comes from. The aggressive stance of confidence that I mentioned before, what we would usually refer to as cockiness, comes from judging your own capabilities over that of others. I find that personally distasteful and pretty much ultimately destructive, mostly because it's entirely reliant on performance, which leaves no room for failure. And if you can't fail, then that puts extreme pressure on every situation in your life, and your self-image just becomes extremely fragile. So for me, the ease and comfort of self-acceptance and allowing others the space to be themselves and think what they want about me is a much more comfortable place to exist, and it allows me to have the presence that I enjoy and that I have noticed that other people enjoy about me as well. So, the quick recap is be your own friend, turn your I'm sorry's into thank yous, and give other people the freedom to think of you what they will. So those are my insights on some specific steps that really helped me to a better place of self-acceptance and eventually confidence. It does take time, so please make sure to have patience with yourself if this is something you're currently going through. I'm wishing you all the best on your journey, and if you have any thoughts or questions about this, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I release videos every Tuesday and they come to you that way, which is fun. And if you like the video, give it a like, maybe. You know, that'd be cool. And I do have one other thing to ask of you. If you would, please share a video with your friends. I think I have a pretty effective way of framing these concepts, and they seem to be helpful to people, but I can only reach so many, so it would be cool if you would maybe share a video. It doesn't have to be this one. If there's a specific video that you think might speak to somebody, you can go and share that video with them. But that way I can start to learn more how to speak to these topics for you guys if there's like more people kind of giving some feedback. So I would like to request that help from you, please and thank you. And that's it for this week. As always, take care of yourself. Okay, bye.